You're listening to the Control System Integrators Association's Talking Industrial Automation podcast, where you get to know the people that make modern manufacturing and processing possible. Now, here is your host, Tony Verhoeven.
Thanks for downloading the Talking Industrial Automation podcast. This is a show to help you get to know the people that make modern manufacturing and processing possible. I'll be talking industrial automation with CSIA system integrators and industry partners to get a better understanding of how they help their clients solve manufacturing and process challenges, and how they became successful in their careers. Along the way, we will touch on system integration best practices, technology, trends, and challenges. Whether you are a manufacturer, end user, supplier, or system integrator, I hope you will enjoy the insights CSIA members will bring to this podcast. Hi, it's Tony Verhoeven, and we're talking industrial automation. And we're so glad to actually do one of our first international podcasts here. So it's in the evening here in Wisconsin, and it's bright and early the next day. It's a funny thing how that works.
Absolutely. We're in the future, Tony.
Here you are. Very good. Well, tell me what lottery numbers to play here. So, go ahead, Ashley, and introduce yourself.
Sure. My name's Ashley Dawson, and I work for Crossmuller Technologies in Sydney, Australia.
Very good. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate you taking a few minutes or about an hour today to talk to us.
No problem. My pleasure.
Well, so what we like to do, Ashley, is like to just kind of pull the curtain back. We like to talk to system integrators and industry partners that are typically members of ours, but other times other people that are in this sphere, and talk to them about, things like how they got here and what are some of the trends in system integration and industrial automation. And so I extended an invitation to you to talk to you guys. And so here, through the power of the internet, we're talking just live, because I guess you guys will not be at the conference here next week.
Not this year, unfortunately. We can't make it this year, but hopefully next year, Tony. I always like a good trip over to enjoy the hospitality.
Yeah, great. Well, this year it's about as close as it could have gotten to you. It's in San Francisco, so at least it's that way.
we could always do one down here, Tony. That'd be great.
That would be great. I would be great. I think that the members all in the States would love a trip down there. Maybe we could just get one big charter plane. Everybody meets in Los Angeles or something like that. So.
It's lovely this time of the year. Perfect weather today.
Excellent. Well, I would love to get down there sometime. So if I do, I'll look you guys up.
Absolutely, and we'll take you out. No problem, Tony.
Very good. Well, so what we'd like to do today, Ashley, is talk about, I guess initially, is your involvement in CSIA. So Crossmuller has been a member for some time. How long has that been?
So we were certified in 2015, late 2015, early 2016, and we were a member for a little while before that. But we were one of the first handful of companies in Australia, at least, to achieve the certification. So it's been now a relationship that we've had for, I'd say, probably 5 years or so.
Excellent. And so do you remember what kind of gravitated you toward?
Yeah, look, so Crossmuller evolved slowly, I suppose, over the years from a fairly small, initially an electrical contracting company. And with the advent of PLC control systems and then software-based control systems, the founder of our business, Michael Kershaw, had a real passion for particularly the software and MES side of the industry. And he grew the business to a certain level where really I think he got to the point of needing to reach out and understand how to take the business to the next level. And so the best practices and the CSIA certification, we really saw that as a great vehicle to be able to, if you like, take a lot of the hard-fought learnings from a bunch of the other great SIs from around the world and use that to bootstrap ourselves to the next level.
Excellent. Okay, I'm just going to pause just for a second, edit point here. It seems like your camera is kind of shaking a little bit.
It's probably because I've got my hands on the table.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to see that, so I didn't know if what was happening. So I'm like, well, it looks like it's shaking a little bit. Okay, so just wanted to. I didn't want to have to be distracting for the viewer here. So that was happening. Okay. So I'll continue. Okay, there we go. Okay. So you mentioned the best practices, Ashley. So do you remember, was there anything about the best practices, especially, or something specific in there that was particularly attractive about saying, wow, this can really help us?
Yeah. So I think in particular, that formalization of the project delivery methodology, a lot of these things, when you step back and look at them, they seem to be just common sense. But until somebody has presented those in a clear, concise, well thought out manner, it's not something that just naturally appears on its own. So I think for our business in particular, we had a long heritage in delivering projects and delivering successful projects, but what we were lacking was that formalized structure that would say, okay, we succeed on projects, and often it's through the technical skills and abilities of the individuals involved. But how do we take that and turn that into a more repeatable process so that as we grow the business, we're not so reliant on one or two talented individuals that we know can deliver a project just because, they happen to have that skill and talent. But how do we provide a framework that will allow the rest of our team to, deliver to a similar level of success and quality, in a more repeatable kind of way. And I think that was really the big thing for us.
Excellent. Yeah. You mentioned that where, obviously you're being able to repeat things and not be reliant on a couple, linchpins and things like that. And I've mentioned this before on a previous episode, but it bears it's worth repeating. One of our other members has mentioned, getting by on a loose collection of heroes and Red Bull and everything, energy and motivation, right? And that'll get you so far.
And commissioning and all those things, yeah.
Yeah, that'll get you a certain point, but it may not get you to, $100 million company or 100 people, right? It'll get you to 25 or 30 or whatever, but being able to not be involved as a boss in the daily, programming of PLCs.
That was one of the other important considerations, I think, for Crossmuller. So we've recently gone through quite a change as an organisation. We, 2.5 years ago now, we were actually acquired by a manufacturing company here in Australia. So as a systems integrator, we're now part of a larger manufacturing organisation. And what that has done for us is it's allowed us to expand the business to a point now where, 2 years ago we had about 25 engineers in that SI business. And today we've got about 40, and we've opened 2 regional offices in that time period as well over the last 2 years. So without the structure around our delivery methodology and, even our management processes, we would really have struggled to be able to do what we've been doing. Not that it's easy in any case, but we've at least got a base that gives ourselves a reasonable chance of success.
Right. So that might be attractive, obviously, to another system integrator listening who's not, and maybe has heard of CSIA or maybe hasn't, and saying, "What's this all about? Is it really worth it?" What does that mean to a customer, though, an end user, a manufacturer who works with a system integrator who doesn't or isn't certified? Does that feel different to them that you're certified? Does that carry forth into daily interactions, into project management? How does it feel to them to work with a certified integrator?
I think it does, and really, I think the question is whether they realise what it's giving them. We work with some customers that have a reasonable level of maturity in automation and have delivered projects over many years with different SIs, and they understand the difference between we call them a one-man band system integrator sometimes, versus an integrator that's really following a sound engineering process to deliver the projects. I think that one of the important things that let's say that the CSIA best practices life cycle drives in a project is the requirements gathering in the design phase of a project, and typically, historically in automation in particular, I think IT and software has been doing this a lot better for a number of years, but automation, I think, has a lot of maturing still to do in this regard. But educating customers that spending resources on gathering those requirements and performing the design sufficiently upfront on a project will actually save them time down the track and overall reduce the life cycle cost of the project. I think that's sometimes a hard sell for some customers. They don't necessarily appreciate that unless they've experienced some project failures themselves. So that's one of the things that we try to focus on, is really educating those customers as to, okay, why should we spend a few weeks at the beginning of the project doing requirements discovery? Why do we need to formalize a design? And I think actually for me, one of the more interesting things has been that some of the new hires that we've brought into the business that have worked in other integration companies have really noticed the difference themselves coming into our CSIA-based structure. And we've had a few comments from some of our new engineers, that really appreciate that structure that we have got in place on our project delivery, because at the end of the day, we all want to deliver successful projects, and whether, the customer obviously has got a financial interest and it's important for their business, but I think it's also important for our engineers that, they're able to turn up at work and enjoy what they're doing. And I think having a good structure around them that helps them do their job, makes quite a difference.
Yeah, I have heard that from other integrators. In fact, Jeff Miller, our chairman and at Interstates Control Systems here, said that he's been able to track, among other things, a lower turnover rate in employees. Have you guys, I don't know if you maybe have tracked that, or does it, because you've happier employees, does it seem like people stick around longer?
Well, look, we've traditionally had a fairly low turnover in any case, Tony. We're going through, like I said before, quite a transition in our business at the moment. So we're actually, we've got a core team of about 40 system integration engineers, but we're now part of an engineering organisation that overall is about 300 strong and cross-disciplinary. So, we've got some civil engineering capacity, mechanical, electrical. And one of the things that we've been asked to do by our new parent company is drive the adoption of these processes within that larger organisation. And I think what we found is that a lot of the engineers that we are working with have really, without pushing from our end, have really taken on board the goals, I suppose, of the process and have really embraced it. So, look, it's a bit early for us to tell what the long-term effects of that are going to be within our larger organisation, but anecdotally, I think there's definitely very much an appreciation for what the processes are trying to achieve.
Right. So tell us a little bit more about, I guess your customer and kind of, I guess when I talk to other business owners and engineers that are system integrators, it has become very clear to me that sometimes what they ask for and what they actually need, what's in an RFP and what actually gets delivered into their shop floor, are two different things. So maybe that's something you can address a little bit, but really specifically, what is some advice that you can give a prospective customer researching automation controls and system integrators? How should they be a good customer, right? We talk about how to be a good engineer, but how do they be a good customer?
I think if they're researching integrators, then they're already a pretty good customer, Tony. I think one of the problems that we come across on a lot of projects, and I don't know exactly whether this is reflected in North America and the rest of the world as well, but there's been quite a trend in Australian manufacturing in particular to outsource and cut internal engineering departments. And so what we find is that, when I began my career, typically when I was working as an integrator on a project, we would be working with an engineering team from the customer, and often they would have their own in-house design shop and their own, electrical engineering department and quite often a controls and automation team. What we find these days is that that's really been cut to the bone by a lot of our customers, to the point where they're really relying largely on contract project managers and contract project engineers for the bulk of their delivery. And I think the biggest challenge that we see, and we've seen this a number of times over the last few years, is that contracts will be packaged up around turnkey supply scopes to minimise contract risk. So the overall contract might be awarded to a large construction company, for example, if a customer is looking to install a new facility. They'll go and award a contract to a large construction company who will then subcontract a package of work to a bunch of equipment suppliers, potentially from different parts of the world. That's one of the challenges that we've got in Australia, is obviously we rely a lot on importing equipment from Europe and the US, and so often to minimise risk, what these large consultants and construction companies will do is that they'll package up turnkey scopes for various parts of the plant to different suppliers, but they will often neglect the overall integration and particularly the overall flow of the data. And these days, I think that's becoming a much bigger consideration potentially than it was in the past. And what we find is that they'll usually lump the automation in with the electrical scope, and that will be subcontracted to an electrical company, who then in turn often subcontract to an automation company. And at that point, they call us in. They say, right, we want to integrate this new plant that we've got. We've got our SAP system. We want data here, here, and here. But we find out they've already ordered the machines. They're in containers. Some of them have already arrived in the country. They've got all sorts of different incompatible automation platforms, and then we're behind the eight ball, struggling to integrate these disparate systems. And what it usually ends up happening there is that the system will function. They'll commission the plant, but it'll never be as integrated or as seamless as what it could be if they had focused a little bit more on the automation from the beginning. And probably, I think, in terms of advice, what I think would really help on some of these projects is to engage an automation integrator, the same way as they engage an architect for the building up front, to work through the initial scoping of the project and to be involved with the tendering out of the packages for equipment, so that there is some commonality. And one of the things that people are concerned about is that they often don't want to mandate particular designs to third-party equipment suppliers because they're worried about the costs of that escalating. But I think in some cases there's just decisions that could be made which would save huge amounts of time and effort and money down the track that really, are no impact on the equipment supplier. But because there's nobody there making those decisions, inevitably, Murphy's Law kicks in, and machine one turns up from supplier one with an ABB robot, and machine two sitting next to it on the line turns up with a KUKA robot, and all of a sudden the plant is now liable to maintain and run these two different brands of equipment for no good reason other than nobody realised that, by simply asking the question, they could have ended up with a common platform.
Right. So maybe it's a little bit like bringing on the architect after the trusses and the prefab walls are already on their way, and
Absolutely, yeah, that's right.
And involving the interior decorator after everything's already painted, the carpet's in.
Exactly, yeah. The carpet's laid, the walls are painted, and we'll get you into.
What can you do for us?
That's right.
Oh, very good. No, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that kind of angle or story before. I didn't realize that was. I haven't heard that here. I'm sure it probably is an issue here in the States as well. Is there anything else, I guess, maybe process-wise that is maybe greatly different in Australia?
Look, we've got an interesting manufacturing environment here. Obviously, our labour cost is very high, and I'm sure that's similar in the US. So it is difficult for Australian manufacturers to compete on price. One of the other interesting things about the Australian market is obviously our geographical isolation. So, we have quite a strong food and beverage industry. Obviously, mining is probably our other major industry in Australia. Crossmuller, as a systems integrator, isn't really involved in the mining industry, but one of the things that we often talk about on our projects is a concept called batch size one, which seems to be more of a problem in Australian manufacturing. So, when we build a line, we tend to have much smaller production runs and more frequent changeovers between products, simply because our market is smaller. We have smaller manufacturing facilities in general. And so one of the challenges that Australian manufacturers tend to come across fairly often is that when they go out to equipment vendors, in Europe, and they say, okay, we're building let's say a dairy processing line, for argument's sake. The designs and the architectures of the equipment that the European suppliers are optimized to deliver is more high volume, high throughput type designs, whereas what we really need from an Australian perspective is a line with a lot more flexibility, which will be doing a lot more product changeovers, because we need to satisfy demand across a large number of product ranges, but relatively small volumes. And so one of the challenges is that typically there's an exercise that we go through in terms of re-engineering some of those systems to try and minimise product changeover times and, if you like, adapt those designs to the smaller product runs and smaller batch sizes. And really that trend is driving all the way through to custom one-off type manufacturing. So we do a lot of work in the timber and construction industry, and particularly kitchen manufacturing. And really there the trend is towards customers being able to do online ordering, having those orders automatically scheduled into production, and having enough flexibility in the manufacturing process to be able to literally custom manufacture a single kitchen cabinet to order, but in an efficient way, the same way that you would be able to mass produce 1 million cabinets. So the challenge there is to try and achieve the same type of efficiency on a one-off custom product that you do on a large volume production run.
Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, that's a big challenge. Because everything these days is everybody wants custom orders. Everybody wants their own thing. One-off, 3D printing sort of thing. So that's interesting to be able to do that.
But I think that's where technology is our friend as well. So we now have these powerful web platforms that we can use and start to integrate into the manufacturing processes. But they really bring their own set of challenges. So one of the interesting things that we see at the moment in the industry is traditionally, as a systems integrator, we would employ engineers that would have a skill set in PLC control systems and SCADA systems, and usually they had a little bit of a background in IT, networking, software, but their main focus was on those core automation skill sets. What we're seeing now is very much a trend towards much more software involved in the manufacturing process, to the point where really when we're hiring graduate engineers now, their software skills are probably more of a consideration to us than any of their other automation skills. And really that's causing some challenges as well for our customers in terms of, they're fairly comfortable with the fact that they have a PLC and a SCADA system that are controlling their process. But once we start to tie those control system elements into some of their business software systems, and those systems start to become critical in terms of their manufacturing process, that really challenges their thinking in terms of how they maintain and operate those IT systems that are now, a critical part of their manufacturing process, in the same way as the PLC and the drives and the I/O on the plant floor. So that whole, I suppose people call it the IT-OT convergence, but there's no doubt that's a real phenomenon, and we're seeing, I suppose, a mixed response to that with our customers. Some IT departments have really embraced that concept and are, getting involved in automation projects and training up their support technicians, and even the role of virtualized server environments in manufacturing is another aspect to that whole IT convergence. But we're still seeing the odd customer where they're really struggling with that integration between their IT groups within the business and their automation and engineering groups. So I think that's one of the the more important trends that we're seeing over the last few years.
Yeah, that's interesting. Every once in a while here at CSIA, I'll get a phone call or an inquiry from a company that does more IT integration, right? And so they're like, why don't I see Accenture or other people here? And system integration is kind of a broad thing, right? So a lot of people are like, well, this is more, a lot of our integrators, you could be here too, but a lot of integrators are focusing on manufacturing and really on the OT, right? And so it was just interesting of like, as we see this convergence and things getting closer together, it'd be interesting to see if, will a company like yours take on more, I guess, IT heavy type of projects?
Potentially. I mean, it's an ongoing conversation for us. The other thing that keeps coming up that's really a change for our business is that the whole concept of service level agreements and support for these software systems. So, typically, automation systems were supported by shift electricians. They would be on call, they'd be able to get into the PLC, do some basic troubleshooting. If the server went down, they'd restart it, and that was about it. But now once you start to get all these web service interfaces, databases, connections to ERP systems, it really requires a much higher level of support, particularly for these 24/7 manufacturing operations that can't tolerate downtime for the system. So something as a systems integrator that we haven't really needed to provide in the past. We're now having customers come to us fairly regularly looking to sign up service agreements, and they're really targeted more at the software layer of the solutions rather than the core base automation layers. So that's a bit of a mindset shift for us, as well as to how we as an organisation are going to support these systems. I think I was just thinking about this yesterday. One of the really interesting trends that I've noticed, and it's really only even in the last 2 or 3 years, is where a SCADA system, for example, traditionally it was just a little black box sitting on a desk in a production office or on the plant floor, even running a SCADA system. That's now moved into virtualization, so almost all of our customers now are running their SCADA systems and automation software systems, if you like, on virtualized infrastructure. But typically now what we see is that, and we work a lot with the Wonderware product family, but what we see there is when we go to even deploy a fairly straightforward, simple SCADA system, we're now looking at 3 or 4 servers to support that. So, we might have an Active Directory server, we might have a SCADA development server, an application server, maybe a historian server, a database. You throw MES into that and you add another couple of servers, and all of a sudden you've got this full IT environment that needs to be managed to support the automation system. And that's really something I think that's only come about with our customers in any case over the last few years. And I think a lot of them are not really 100% geared up to support that level of infrastructure from an automation perspective. So quite a challenge.
Right. So we talked a little bit about the skills of some of the engineers and staff that you have. And it's no secret that finding a good skilled engineers is finding them is, it's a challenge, right? What would you tell, and I guess somebody who's maybe just coming out of college or somebody who's in college, what kind of skills, obviously you kind of maybe alluded to that a little bit of like, hey, these things are database oriented, automation systems are database oriented, or at least, connected, right? And so now you start to talk about Internet of Things and industrial Internet of Things. What sort of skills could or should they build to maybe be prepared for a career in
When I'm hiring a graduate these days, I'm really looking for three things. So if they understand the concepts of a database and they've played around with a SQL database before, that's great. They've really got to have a strong background in, typically for us now, it's .NET. So that .NET platform or similar in terms of the programming background. And then they've really got to understand at least the concepts of the web. So how a web application works, the basics of web services and modern JavaScript-based web applications and how they interact with back-end database systems. I think if you have a relatively broad understanding in that space, then picking up PLC programming really isn't super difficult, and working in a SCADA system, well, we can train somebody up in a few weeks to be able to do, at least the basics of building a SCADA application. Obviously, the devil's in the detail, and there's a lot of training that goes into to delivering an overall architecture, if you like. But we've had a lot of success in the last few years with graduates, which has been really positive for our business. We've put on probably 7 graduates over the last couple of years, and almost all of those have been really successful. And a lot of that is, I think, that regardless of somebody's age or experience, I think there's really a couple of types of people in the world. There's a very good Dilbert cartoon that comes to mind about. I think it's I think they call it, he's got the thing or something like that. But it's the that mindset of an engineer that can look at an available set of tools, or almost like a Lego set, and just sort of naturally understand how those individual components can be applied to achieve a particular outcome. And so there's some people that can just naturally have that ability, and so coming straight out of school, that they can slot straight in. Others take a bit more time, but I think what we've learned is that as long as you pick up a young, enthusiastic, smart individual with a little bit of guidance and a little bit of support, it doesn't really take too much to turn those guys into productive members of the team.
Excellent. What are some of the things that you've seen, I guess, industrial automation and control systems engineering recently? Is there anything that's like super hot right now that gets you excited? What kind of gets you out of bed these days?
Well, we are doing a lot of work at the moment in warehouse automation, and I think there might be some people that think that would be a fairly boring area to work in, but what we found is a real gap, I think, particularly locally with some of our customers, in how they handle their warehouse management, particularly tying that warehouse into their production systems and into their business systems. So look, we're putting a lot of time and effort at the moment into building some standard platforms where we can plug in a stacker crane system or an AGV system or even a manual warehousing system into sort of a common warehouse execution framework, we're calling it. It's causing us a few challenges, but really a huge amount of opportunities for us in Australia. I mean, even if we don't manufacture a lot here in Australia, everything that comes into the country in a container goes through a warehouse or two in its journey through the supply chain. So, when we look around Sydney, for example, we don't see a lot of new manufacturing facilities going up everywhere, but we see acres and acres and acres of warehousing being installed, and a lot of those warehouses are still very manual. So we see a huge opportunity there in automating a lot of that materials handling as part of the supply chain for some of our customers. And I think particularly what excites us is the possibility to really make use of the automation platforms that a lot of these companies already have in place and extend those into the warehousing, and then being able to tie those into their business systems in a way that lets them do things that they haven't been able to do in the past. That's one of the interesting things that we've got on at the moment. And the other thing that really, I suppose, if you want to know what's getting me out of bed at the moment, it's this challenge that we've got with our new parent company to take our relatively modest systems integration business and to turn that into a large turnkey engineering organisation delivering top to bottom manufacturing solutions. So everything from the process design consulting through to the civil design, mechanical design, supply of automation hardware, construction of the buildings, commissioning, and then integration in terms of automation and ERP systems. So we've bitten off quite a large challenge there, Tony, but we've got an interesting few years ahead of us.
Right. Well, that's pretty cool. So basically what you guys could do is, obviously you could design an automation and control system kind of end to end, including the construction of the building. But, if you've got civil in there as well, you could also design the properties, retention ponds or something like that as well.
What we're really trying to do is flip the typical model on its head.
Yeah.
So when I mentioned before that we see a lot of these contracts being awarded, if you like, from the construction down. What we really want to do is be able to flip that on its head, build a relationship with our customers that says, okay, that we can supply the turnkey solution, but let's not start with the building. Let's start by understanding the process. Let's start by finding the very best technology that we need to go into your process, engineering a line around that technology, and then we can put that in a building for you if you want. But I think what we've seen is that when you start from that, when you start by engaging a building contractor and an architect, and then work your way down to automation, you end up with these convoluted subcontract arrangements that really don't get the best outcome for the customer. What they are good at is dealing with commercial risk. So one of the challenges with the approach that we're trying to bring to the market is that really it's based on a large amount of trust with the customer. We've got to go on a journey with them that says, all right, we need to start by selecting that core technology, because if we get that wrong, forget about everything else. We need to very carefully think about whether we want to go to an overseas supplier and ask them for a turnkey plant, because typically what that leads to is an element of the customer being sort of locked into a fairly inflexible outcome. So we want to go through that process with the customer of putting some real design into the line itself, and then we can talk about the rest of the process. But within larger organisations, there's a real desire just to place a big PO up front for a fixed contract amount and push all of that risk out. And what we're saying to the customer is, look, that's one way to do things, but there's plenty of evidence out there that says, maybe that's not going to get you the best result for your business at the end of the day. And maybe you need a partner that can really take on some of the role that in years past might have been performed by an in-house engineering team. Maybe you need to partner with a company that can help you based on, everything that we're doing is based on our own experience. So we run 3 of our own large manufacturing facilities. We implement all of the systems that we are also implementing for our customers. So, we take our own medicine in that regard. And, that means that we've learned a lot of those hard lessons ourselves, and hopefully we can use that to provide value to our customers.
Very good. Well, Ashley, let's change direction here a little bit here. Tell me a little bit about you. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Melbourne, Australia. I studied computer systems engineering, but it's one of those interesting things. I often say that I was always an engineer. I always used to tinker in my parents' garage at home. I would take things apart. I would be always fiddling with computers. And I came across this book when I was probably late secondary school. It was called Controlling the World with Your PC. And that just blew my mind, that you could connect these things up to the parallel port at the time on your computer, and you could turn lights on and off, and you could and I automated a Lego train set, and I managed to blow up my parents' computer a few times in the it wasn't always so popular. But look, so I suppose I was always going to study engineering, but I really didn't have any appreciation for industrial automation at the time. I kind of understood software, I kind of understood electronics, and that was really the core of my training, if you like. So I understood telecommunications and networking, but I didn't really have much of a view of the automation industry. So look, it was really, I suppose, just one of those happy coincidences that happen sometimes, where I happened to have a family friend who worked in an engineering organisation, an OEM, that was just looking at importing some palletizing robots, and they needed to bring somebody in to basically get trained up and help them to support these palletizing systems. And so I was just finishing up my university degree, and I was offered a job playing with robots. So what was I going to do? I didn't have much choice. Sign me up.
I see your point.
So that was my introduction into the industry, and from there I spent about 6 or 7 years with that OEM, and they were manufacturing materials handling equipment, batching systems, packaging systems. And so I did a lot of travelling around Australia and New Zealand and Asia, commissioning those systems, and got a lot of good experience. And then at some point jumped over the fence into the systems integration world, which is a bit of a different style of business. So it went from, as an OEM, sort of being responsible for everything from the mechanical design of the equipment and the automation control systems, to, on the systems integration side, being exposed to probably larger projects, but more software focused. And then 2 years ago, when Crossmuller was acquired by Borg Manufacturing, I got the opportunity to move up to Sydney and take on the day-to-day running of the Crossmuller systems integration team up here. So,
excellent.
I moved the family up, and that's where we are today.
Very good. And so what is your specific role there at Crossmuller?
So I'm the general manager, so I take care of the day-to-day operations of our systems integration team in our Sydney office and as well as our Brisbane and Melbourne offices.
Okay, excellent. And tell me, let's go back up a little again here. You talked about your parents and their computer and blowing it up. What did your parents do? Were they not obviously to have a computer, 20 some years ago is 20, 30 years ago, maybe depending on when this was, it was definitely kind of a cool thing, right? Not everybody, even 20 years ago, not everybody had a computer, right? And certainly we didn't all have smartphones.
Days, so the only rule was that if I broke it, I had to fix it. But look, my dad was an accountant, so he really had absolutely no idea about anything technology related. So I inherited the job, if you like, of being the family technical guy. So whenever the VCR stopped working, that was my job.
Yeah, absolutely. No flashing 12 in your house, right?
Exactly right. Exactly.
Very good. What did your mom do?
She worked at a school for many years as an administration assistant, and eventually retired a couple of years ago. So my parents are both retired now, luckily, and relaxing on the beach.
Excellent.
We can only hope one day, Tony.
Right. So one day. So tell me a little bit about your kind of like what's going on right now, like with your day. How do you start your day? What does like your first 90 minutes look like?
Well, I think the scourge of email is our biggest problem these days, Tony. So I usually have to spend a good half an hour or so just clearing the backlog of emails. And then really for me, it's a balance between, keeping an eye on our project execution on the one hand, and business development and just general management of the team on the other hand. So I spend a fair bit of time out and about talking to customers, trying to secure additional project work. But there's the day-to-day demands of managing a team of 40 people. So we have all the normal IT and recruiting and personnel management activities that need to happen. So between all of that, it keeps me quite busy.
Yeah, very good. What are some of the skills that you find most useful, in your own kind of personal skills, whether they're technical or maybe soft skills? Is there anything in particular you're like, man, I'm really glad I have this as a strength?
Well, look, it's always, I think as engineers, we tend to perhaps prioritize our technical abilities over and above our soft skills sometimes, but really, the ability to, I suppose, see a problem from multiple points of view and be able to navigate through a complex set of considerations and sometimes conflicting constraints to try to either solve a particular project challenge or to help a customer in terms of getting a project across the line. I think that those soft skills of being able to listen and understand various perspectives on an issue and then be able to sort of navigate a way through the conflicting constraints on those perspectives. I think that's probably one of the key skills that I felt that I've needed to test myself in this role.
Very good. Very good. Well, Ashley, I really appreciate you. I know you've got to get going on with your day and it's getting late here, so I don't want to hold you up any longer. But I really appreciate you taking some time to talk with us, and hopefully the listener will got to go know you a little better.
My pleasure, Tony. It's been good to talk.
Been good to talk to you, and sorry we'll miss you at this year's conference, but hope to meet you in person maybe next year.
Absolutely. We'll see everybody there for sure.
Very good. This is Tony Verhoeven with CSIA. We're talking industrial automation with Ashley Dawson, Crossmuller. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe in iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Help others find us by sharing your favorite episode with a colleague and give us a rating in iTunes. Visit CSIAexchange.com/podcast for a full list of episodes. Contact us at podcast@controlsys.org. podcast@controlsys.org. Thanks to bensound.com for the music.
Thanks for listening to the Talking Industrial Automation podcast. Read the Industrial Automation blog and find and research qualified system integrators at CSIAexchange.com. For more information on why your system integrator should be CSIA certified, visit controlsys.org. controlsys.org.